The NBA season is now underway now that opening night is behind us, and I just wanted to give a few thoughts and kind of go over the games that happened last night. And first, I want to go over the Golden State Warriors and Lakers game. I know the Bucks and the Nets played first, but I think that this game was the most interesting game out of the two games because of where I have these two teams ranked, the question marks that they will have as the season goes along that they will need to answer. I just really wanted to see at first blush what these two teams looked like, and this game was really good. There was definitely some clunkiness, some rust, if you will, maybe some nerves from opening night because the play was a little bit sloppy, but overall it was a good game, and there were some things to take away from it. Not too much, obviously, because it's opening night, but there are some things that I see with the Warriors and the Lakers that I'm going to be tracking throughout the season, kind of confirming some questions that I had about them going into the year. I thought the pace in the first half of this game was pretty fast and at times pretty hectic, especially for the Warriors, who just had a few just really boneheaded turnovers in the first half. There were two possessions with Draymond and Jordan Poole where they tried to do some dribble handoff action, and that obviously did not work as Draymond threw the ball one way and Jordan Poole went the other way. Stephen Curry had some really boneheaded passes on back-to-back possessions, and then in the third possession in a row in the second quarter, he tried to dunk the ball and missed. The Lakers were on fire for the first half, at least LeBron James and Anthony Davis. If you're a Lakers fan right there, you shouldn't overreact to the loss last night. LeBron and Anthony Davis playing this well and looking fresh, looking healthy, looking in shape. That is something as a Laker fan I would be personally excited to see, because if those two are healthy, the Lakers are just going to be contenders no matter what. But the Lakers fit questions, lineup choices to kind of accommodate Russell Westbrook and the fact that he can't shoot, those propped up last night. I don't know why, but Vogel in the first half decided to play Russell Westbrook and Rondo together with Dwight Howard and Anthony Davis and Kent Bazemore. That lineup was out there at one point, and that's going to be a question with the Lakers all year. How are they going to find lineups to maximize the value of Russ? Because if Russ plays with Rondo in some lineups, that's not going to work. And if Russ plays with two bigs in a lineup, that is also not going to work, or you're just not going to get the value that you hope for out of Russ. Carmelo Anthony came off the bench and hit a few threes, and the Lakers crowd was really hyped for Carmelo Anthony to go into the game and rooted for every shot he took. You could just hear a in the crowd every time he took a three or a post-up. There were a little too many post-ups for Carmelo Anthony, too much for my liking, but the Lakers definitely have some clunky lineups that they need to figure out, and that was apparent before the season started, and it's going to be interesting to see how Vogel figures it out as the year goes along. But the Lakers really shouldn't fret about this loss. Yes, the questions that everybody had before the season started about this team kind of showed up tonight, but I do think there are some correctable things. One, mainly, LeBron James and Anthony Davis look really good already, and it was too late, but it seemed by the end of the game, Vogel was able to find a lineup that had Russell Westbrook, Kent Bazemore, Avery Bradley, LeBron James, and Anthony Davis at the center, and Avery Bradley being in the closing lineup is kind of funny considering that he was waived by the Warriors before the regular season started, and then the Lakers literally just picked him up a few days ago, and he's already in the closing lineup, and he might be in the closing lineup more often, and his contract is probably going to be guaranteed, I imagine, soon, because Bradley came in last night and kind of changed the game in the second half when the Warriors were making the run, but it was obviously too late at that point. Going back to the Warriors side of things, I mean, all the low bargain free agency signings that they made, their bench unit that was upgraded, they really showed out tonight. It's very apparent that this team is just going to be playing not a different brand of basketball, because Steve Kerr hasn't really changed his system. He's just upgraded the players that have basketball IQ. When you're able to upgrade some of the bench production with guys like Nemanja Bjelica, Andre Iguodala, Otto Porter Jr., then Kerr's system is just going to be accentuated, and that's what we saw tonight, to the tune of 30 assists on 41 shots, and some of the ball movement, and I'm going to put some of the special ball movement possessions in this video. It was just incredible from the Warriors. I like that Kerr at the end of the game went with Nemanja Bjelica, Draymond Green, Andrew Wiggins, Damian Lee, and Stephen Curry to close out the game. Jordan Poole had an ankle injury at some point in the second half, and I hope that doesn't hinder him too much because he's so shifty and on balance and has impeccable footwork with his handle, his ability to get to the rim, and how he gets his shots off, that I just worry that an ankle injury for a player that cuts all the time like that and puts so much torque whenever he turns his body is going to just impact him, is going to linger. So hopefully the ankle injury isn't too serious. But Jordan Poole and Stephen Curry shot like shit in the first half and then really came on in the second half. Jordan Poole hit all 4 of his threes in the second half, had 16 points. Despite the Warriors turning the ball over in the first half, they were in this game, and that is the mark of a good team, at least a team that you know is going to be in the mix in the Western Conference, and Klay Thompson isn't even back yet. And James Wiseman, even though I still kind of question the role that James Wiseman is going to be in this time around, but the Warriors have a system. They added players and high IQ players that accentuate the system, and they got more shooting around Steph than ever before. And like I said, Klay Thompson isn't even back yet, and the Warriors' free agency signings are already showing dividends. Andre Iguodala, I should also mention, looked like he was 30-year-old Andre Iguodala instead of the longer in the tooth version that we have seen the last couple of years. But the Warriors' collection of talent is apparent, and like I highlighted in a video before, with internal improvement from Jordan Poole, if Andrew Wiggins continues his solid play from last year, Juan Toscano-Anderson also had some really key moments in the game yesterday in terms of ball movement, hitting open threes. This team is going to be dangerous, and I'm really looking forward to see how Klay gets back in the mix. But this was a perfect opening night game for these two teams. It was a good game. LeBron James and Anthony Davis looked great. Russell Westbrook did look bad, but I also think the lineups that Vogel was throwing out there did not help, and I don't care if it's opening night. Lakers fans, at least Laker fans that would take truth serum, would tell you that they were worried about Vogel playing 2 big lineups and Westbrook playing with Rondo, as we saw sometimes in the preseason. I just don't understand it, but I imagine that more lineups will be figured out as the year goes along. Now, going back to the first game that was tonight between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Brooklyn Nets, it was ring night for the Bucks. The defending champions got their championship rings, blinged out, ready to go. The banner is hanging in Pfizer form, but it's a new season for the Bucks, and they opened it up with a very controlling wire-to-wire victory for the Milwaukee Bucks. I wouldn't say it was a blowout, although in the first quarter it was looking like that, especially when the Bucks shifted Giannis to the 5. Now, I am interested to see if the Bucks are going to run more switching schemes this year. I know last year they were shuffling through defensive schemes because they were trying to change it up from the previous 2 years before that. They really did a good job at the beginning of the game just switching everything and making the Nets take contested jumpers, which I do have concerns with about the Nets, even though they have a lot of offensive talent. And this was one of the reasons why Kyrie Irving not being there no longer made the Nets the undisputed favorites, because now the Nets look a little bit more like a jump shooting team. Patty Mills kept him in the game for a bit. Joe Harris later hit some timely threes. Kevin Durant eventually got going in the second half, but Kyrie Irving is really the only Nets player that doesn't need a pick and roll to get to the rim at will. If you look at Kevin Durant's numbers last year, Kevin Durant's percentage of field goal attempts coming at the rim were a career low last year. James Harden is older and looks just a tick slower. The Nets really didn't get to the free throw line that much. And look, the Nets are going to be fine just offensively throughout the regular season. I really am not worried about their defense. I think that's going to get better as the year goes along. But the Nets do have a problem with their offense in that if they take a lot of jump shots, if they're primarily a jump shooting team, they could win the title that way. That's just a harder proposition because they don't have that guy to break you down off the dribble unless Harden can revert back to the Houston Harden, who was also getting to the rim in addition to the step back threes. But Harden has looked just a tad slower. Even the in-shape James Harden that we see going into this year, he looks a little bit slower, and that's a byproduct of age. But these two guys, Durant and Harden, are still tier 1 level franchise players, two clear top 10 players. Kevin Durant is arguably the best player in the world. It's just that Durant is at a different stage in his point in his career where he gets to his spots, rises up over the top, uses a screen to get a shot off. Unless it's the playoffs, he's just not going to go to the rim that often, especially given that his last 2 seasons pretty much have been riddled with injury and rest, and he has a lot of miles on him. I just imagine he's just not going to do it that much this regular season. But this is where the Nets miss Kyrie Irving, because he was the only guy who can easily break somebody down off the dribble and get to the rim, and that's when the Nets ball movement started, when the defense would collapse and it was just talent everywhere on the court that's just one pass ahead of the defense. And really, Giannis just dominated the Nets. Drew Holiday went out at some point in the game in the first half with a heel contusion. The Bucks have kind of been banged up heading into this game, not having Dante DiVincenzo still. Bobby Portis is still out with that hamstring injury. They are, resorting to the deep end of their bench. But at the end of the day, the Bucks have the best player in the world. They're going to still win a lot of regular season games. I really wasn't shocked by this outcome. It's ring night. The energy is out of control for the fan base, for the players, I imagine, and they were just going to come out and take care of business. The championship swagger already looks like it is taking full effect for the Bucks. They were kind of just getting stuff easy. And that is the other concern I have with the Nets. Although I mentioned earlier, I think their defense will get better. They might get beat up on the offensive glass quite a bit. And that was something the Bucks did in this game, because the Nets also ran a switching scheme, and whenever an offensive rebound was there to be had, the Bucks were able to just out-physical the Nets and grab the offensive rebound. They were able to get extra shots out of it. But overall, it was about what I expected from this kind of game. You really can't glean anything from a potential conference finals matchup between these two teams. I still think these two teams are the clear 2 best teams in the East and in the NBA, but you really can't take anything away too much from this matchup that is overarching for the season. The Bucks were just getting their championship rings that night, and the Nets are starting out the season on the road. So we'll see as the season goes along. We'll see how healthy the Bucks get, when DiVincenzo will come back. I'm sure Bobby Portis will be coming back at some point as well. Nonetheless, it was a very interesting opening night. Glad to have fans back on opening night. The energy was awesome. It's good to have fans back in the arena. Really, I'm just looking forward to the rest of this season. I think it's going to be really exciting. There's just a lot of good basketball to be played this year, and I'm excited to do videos like this as the season goes on, in addition to the other mini videos I'm going to be putting on the channel. So those are my stray thoughts from opening night.